بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. Dear respected viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another brand new episode of the program entitled Ask Iman, the late night show where no topic is off the limit. This is the program where you ask those challenging questions, those intimate questions, those questions that you normally don't ask, where you shy away. This is the very program where you can ask us directly using any of the details that is appearing at the bottom of your TV screen. For more details, inshallah, do get in touch if you would like to text us via WhatsApp or telephone us directly into the studio or email us, or in fact, if you would like to leave us a message on our social media platform, that is Facebook page. This program is broadcasted live from the studio of Eman Channel, watched on Sky 757. Inshallah, tonight's guest, none other than Fadilat al-Sheikh Khidr Hussein, who is a respected Imam and Khatib. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
First of all, welcome to the show and thank you very much for giving us your valuable time so late at night once again.
Barakallahu feekum.
Now, let's start before we move on to the actual discussion and the question and answer session. This week, we are aware that the World Health Organization recognizes World Mental Health Day on 10th of October every year, which is just the Thursday that's gone by. And the year's theme was set by the World's Federation for Mental Health is suicide prevention. Now, as Muslim, we're all aware that it's one of the major sin of Islam. But when I looked up to it, a lot of researchers confirm that majority of the cases which leads to suicide are the undiagnosed mental health issues that perhaps we do not talk about. Now, as Muslim, whenever we think about mental health, it's something a taboo. It looks like it's a stigma in our community, perhaps. Now, first of all, if I would like you to clarify, why is it as Muslim we have to shy away from discussing this subject, mental health? And just to give an example, if someone is suffering from any other illnesses such as diabetic, heart pressure, cholesterol, whatever it is, we don't shy away. We discuss that. But when it comes to mental health, we're so reluctant. We don't want to even talk about it. And sometimes it also affects the marriages, leads into domestic violences. And later on, we also see it affects the extremism and terrorism. So if you can just kindly touch on that. As an imam, I'm sure you have a very large congregation. How do you deal with this subject?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihi al-Kareem. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa ba'd. Respected brothers and sisters, those of you who have joined today's program, we want to welcome you to this amazing program that we have. The topic that we will be speaking about today, inshallah, and the questions that were raised, very, very important topic and very, very important questions when it comes to mental health and this very issue, this illness. It's an area that unfortunately many Muslims have no knowledge of, and because it's an area that we have no knowledge of, for us to indulge in that area, we often take a step back. The fear of the unknown, and this is the reason that we find many of us are oblivious to, unaware when it comes to mental health issues or mental health related issues. Those of us who are based in religious institutions, whether it's a mosque, whether it's a religious institution, this is something we deal with on a regular basis. And often people who don't know about mental health and the effects of mental health and how the build-up of mental health takes place within a person, often the diagnosis is that we seem to think of it as a possession of jinn, and then we leave it as that. And in most cases, that is not the case. And there are cases where, yes, there is the influence of sihr, there is the influence of jinn, and that could lead to mental problems. But if you closely look into or study this very illness, then you will come to know it could be due to many problems that a person experienced in their life, many issues that they went through in their life, many trial and tribulation that they endured in their life led to this illness. So for that very reason, brothers and sisters, this is a very important topic that needs to be discussed, and it needs to be brought to surface. And one study showed more than 6,500 people have committed suicide. So the number of suicide is on the rise, and a huge number from amongst them, the people who committed suicide is because of mental health issues. And yes, Islam prohibits suicide, and the consequence is grave. But you have to appreciate the build up to the suicide. Often we don't speak about that. We don't think about that. We often see the person who's committed suicide in a negative way. But we have to understand what led that person towards suicide. Because a person will only take their life because they have come to a point of their life when they cannot bear it anymore. And this is where they need help. And if we fail to help them, if we fail to understand the reasons why they come to this point, then we're not helping that person. And we are quick in giving fatwa that this person is going to Jahannam and this person has committed a grave crime. No doubt. We don't deny that. But what about the help that should have been given to that person, the mental health that this person had, and the support that should have been given to that person, the advice and the guidance that should have been given to that person? Most cases, brothers and sisters, we fail at that very important stage of a person's journey. And for that very reason, it leads to suicide. So people who commit suicide, in most cases, you have to understand the build up to suicide, the difficulty that they're going through in their life, the hardship and the lack of support and guidance given to them is eventually what leads them to committing such atrocity and taking their own lives. So it's an issue that needs to be discussed, and inshallah over the course of today's program we hope to speak about this. And if you have any questions, then please do bring them forward, inshallah. Wabillahi tawfiq.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. And the other element of that I would like to touch is a lot of people accuse or make an allegation that perhaps that person is a sinner, and that's why Allah is punishing him or her by giving those mental health issues. Is that true? Is that fair?
Every illness is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is given to the slave or the creation of Allah as a form of test. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yusib minhu." For the one whom Allah wants any khair, any good, if Allah wants to bring close his slave or servant towards him, he puts that person through trial and tribulation in many different forms. And it could be trial in terms of your family, tribulation in terms of your asset, imtihan, a test when it comes to illness, in so many different aspects. So an illness is not a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but rather it is a test from Allah. However, it could be a punishment if you lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put me through this difficulty, then it will be a purification for you. It will rather be a way of attaining the closeness of Allah. So not in any way should a person think that it is a punishment from Allah, but the believer would consider any illness, whether it's mental health, whether it's cancer, whether it's diabetes, or all of those illnesses that have become very common, that the believer considers that to be a spiritual purification, a physical purification, and a path in attaining the closeness of Allah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Now that leads on to another question, and that is we see a lot of businesses now popping up in the name of ruqya, curing mental health, perhaps people without qualification, without knowledge, and then later on we find a lot of controversies associated, and we know a lot of incidents have taken place. Those so-called people, which are well known on the social media platform, have then come out and then found out to be in a very different form of what they were preaching. Now, how does one look into these of ruqya matter, or who are qualified? What's the threshold or what's the verification method?
Firstly, we have to establish what ruqya is. Ruqya is spiritual healing in light of the Quran and the Sunnah. The scholars, they say it has to be ruqya shar'iyya. It has to be a ruqya, incantation, spiritual healing done through the Quran and the Sunnah, the remedy that has been given to us by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam through his authentic narration. Not ruqya shirkiyya, not a spiritual healing that is done where there is element of polytheism involved, or any connotation to polytheism, or any actions that are unlawful, contrary to the Sharia. When it comes to ruqya itself, performing spiritual healing in light of the Quran and Sunnah, not only is it permissible, it is recommended. Imam Khattabi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قد رقى ورقى وأمر بها وأجازها. Our beloved Rasul Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم, he performed the ruqya himself, and he received the ruqya himself, and he permitted it. It's absolutely fine to use ruqya when it's needed as a means, as a wasila, as a tool of spiritual healing. unfortunately, that which is lawful, often people misuse that which is lawful, and people start seeing that very thing that is lawful as something that is impermissible, something that is wrong, something that is unlawful, something that is incorrect. Why? Because of the misuse by so-called Muslims who don't uphold and who don't use this blessing in the correct way.
Now, other than the ruqya, what other alternative methods are available living in this Western plural society?
Ruqya should be option number one for the believer. And when I say ruqya, it doesn't mean that I have to go to someone. I am not feeling well. All of a sudden, I feel certain symptoms. The very first thing I need to do is apply the remedy from the sunnah of our beloved Rasul. An example of that is, مثلا, to read Surah Ikhlas, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, and blow it on your body. And then that I need to practice. Gradually, if there is no change, then go and seek someone else. However, it doesn't mean we discount the importance of seeking medical help. And this means going to your GP, going to a counselor for counseling, and people who are experts in the field.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. With this, it's time for now for a short break. And as Sheikh has mentioned, do seek professional advice. There are advice available. We have to utilize it. There are resources available, and we are privileged enough to have those. Inshallah, we'll be discussing and taking more of your questions after a short break. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back after the short break. You're watching Ask Iman, the late night show where no topic is off the limit. In our first segment, we have been discussing about the World Mental Health Day, which occurs every year on 10th of October, and this year's theme was about suicide prevention. And let's start our conversation and questions, in fact, with this discussion about mental health and in conversation with Sheikh Khidr Hussein, who is with us today answering your question. Sheikh, welcome back. Now, let's start with the first question, which have been very relevant to the discussion we had in our first segment, and it comes, Assalamu alaikum. My son is 15 years old and is suffering from jinn possession, which is causing his mental health to go down. We have had him treated with ruqya, but he is still very unwell. He feels suicidal and feels he is a danger.
Firstly, my dear sister, we make dua for your son, this young man, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He removes this difficulty that this young man is going through, and that He rewards him and you as a mother for the patience that you are applying through this difficulty. Firstly, I want to raise a question, and this is a very important question. How did we know, or how did we find that he has been possessed by a jinn? That is question number one, and this has to be established first. If it is known for sure through professional help and seeking professional ruqya from experts who have established that yes, there is possession of jinn, then it is that we now apply a proper ruqya, continuous ruqya. It's not just 1 month of ruqya, rather it is a continuous journey, a gradual journey in removing this difficulty that he is experiencing. In the very beginning of the show, my dear sister, we mentioned that at times it's not the possession of jinn. Sometimes it's just actually mental health problem. It's an illness itself where people have to go and seek medical advice, and this means that we can go to the GP and really apply pressure to the GP and say, I need to go and see a professional. I need to go and see a consultant. I need to see an expert in this field, mental illness field, because my son is on the verge of taking his life and it's a serious matter. There is help out there. So we just have to go and seek that help. So instead of classing it as jinn possession, and I don't know the situation fully, this is the way we understand it, that in most cases it is an actual mental health issue and it might not be jinn possession. So if it's the case, if the circumstance is that you have established this jinn possession, then of course seek ruqya constantly and at the same time apply medical help. And this means that you go and see a professional, go and speak to them, someone who's an expert in suicide prevention. Speak to those people. Maybe they can advise and guide and help this young man who is going through this difficulty. And if it's ruqya that you need, then please do continue applying the ruqya from the Sunnah, especially when it comes to recitation of the Quran. We would advise constantly read the Quran in his presence and really apply some of those remedies from the Sunnah. You as a mother on him, and him himself, he can apply those remedies bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. May Allah make it easy for you.
Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Thank you very much for asking this question. And as Sheikh has mentioned, please visit the website, NHS website, and there is a section, if you do type in a search, suicide prevention, or even if you Google, there are a lot of charity organization, mainstream charity organization that works specifically in this particular field. Also speak to your consultant GP. If need be, referral can be given to a therapist or a psychiatrist, whatever it is. And I'm very proud to say that, alhamdulillah, these issues have been addressed, and so rightly it needs to be discussed so that we can create more awareness. May Allah give shifa to the young man and give you patience as well. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to the next question. Assalamu alaikum. If I own my house outright, is home insurance still permissible for me to have?
When it comes to owning a freehold property and protecting the property from fire, from theft, so on and so forth, having home insurance is quite an important aspect of owning a house. It's related to you being the owner of a property. If you had a mortgage, then of course you have to have home insurance, because the mortgage company would not lend you the money unless they can establish that you have taken out a proper home insurance, because in order for them to give you the money, they have to ensure that this very property that they have given a loan out to, it's in a good state. in terms of its security, stability. When it comes to owning it outright, now it's not an obligation for you. However, living in this country, we have to understand this is a matter of fiqh al-aqaliyah, the fiqh of the minority. If we were living in a country, vast majority, where the population is Muslim, and we don't even have these systems. Alhamdulillah, we live in a country where the protection of our property, protection of our wealth, we have all these amazing systems. So when it comes to having home insurance, it is not a matter of it is absolutely permissible, and no one could at the same time say it's absolutely prohibited. We're trying to answer from a angle and understand that we are living in a country where having protection for our house is absolutely important. So from that angle, many of the ulama, they said it's absolutely fine for you to have home insurance, and as long as you pay it off in one go and there is no interest involved in that. So it's not just a monthly payment where if you pay installment, then at the end of the year you're paying more. But if you make one-off payment, for example, for the property you own, if the home insurance is £200 yearly and you pay that off in one go to protect your house, that if something happens, then at least you have a company that will pay you out or protect you, your family, because you don't want to be on the street, you don't want to be in that difficulty. Some of the scholars said it's fine. The other group of scholars, they said, well, no, you own the property. It's freehold. There is no need for you to take out the home insurance because you don't have a mortgage. So on the basis of this, you don't want to take a product out that has interest involved in it or interest related to it. So for that very reason, it is awla. It is better that you abstain from it. As I mentioned, it's not clearly haram and halal, my dear brothers and sisters. We are living in this country. It's a matter of better to abstain from it. Why? Because your commitment to Allah is more important over your property, over your wealth, and everything that you own. Following Allah and what He loves is more important. So in that case, it is better, as some of the ulama, they said that if it's freehold, you abstain from it because you don't want any interest related products that have interest in it, in something that is halal, and the house that you have is freehold, so which is pure, and you don't want something impure mixed with that. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. Let's clarify certain things. So there is difference of opinion. Some say it's allowed, some say it's not allowed. So the viewers can make their own decision after their own research.
So the traditional scholars, scholars who perhaps don't live in Western countries, they would tell you that no, it's not permissible. So they will, from a textual perspective, they're right to say so, because if there is interest involved in that. So they would say, well, you have to abandon that which has interest in it. But scholars who live in Western countries, who understand the situation here, and they try their utmost to make matters easy for the Muslims living here, they would say it's an option. But they wouldn't say it's absolutely lawful. No one could say that which has interest related to is absolutely lawful, halal. No scholar can say that.
That's fine. And another question I'd like to clarify. You said the monthly installment, there may be interest, but just to clarify, there are certain companies that don't charge interest on a monthly policy. If that is the case, can they go for a monthly installment if it's
So if there is no interest, as we said, the group of scholars that say it's absolutely fine to take the home insurance, in that case, yes, no problem.
Okay, thank you ever so much for that. Now let's move on to the next question, and that is, what is the ruling on the idda period that a divorced woman observes? Is it that after the third menstrual cycle, she is now free to move on, or she should wait exactly till the date she was divorced, comes back in the third month of her idda period? Jazakallah khair.
When it comes to the waiting period, the idda actually means the waiting period after a woman has been divorced. There is two opinions, and the majority of the scholars, they say, وَالْمُطَلَّقَةُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء, as Allah says in the Quran, that a divorcee woman, she has to wait 3 quru. What is quru? The scholars, they say hayd, that it means when she has completed 3 menstrual cycles. So it means that 3 menstrual cycles has been completed. This is the time period that she waits. After that, then the relationship comes to an end, and the end of the waiting period. Some of the scholars, they said it means tuhur, that after she has completed the menstrual cycle and then she attains the purity period. So this is what it means. So there is a difference of opinion in regards to this mas'ala. But the majority of the scholars, 3 hayd, 3 menstrual cycles. Wallahu alam.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the next question. What is the best dua for anxiety, depression?
From amongst the masnoon du'as that the Prophet ﷺ has taught us, especially when it comes to depression and anxiety, one of those du'as that comes to mind, my dearest brothers and sisters, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan. Rasulullah ﷺ would often make this du'a, seeking help from Allah when it comes to ham and hazan, distress, grief, and worry, constant worry and distress and grief. He would make this dua. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazni. So make that dua, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum.
And if they want to find out about this dua, any books you
This
can
dua can
recommend?
be found in Hisnul Muslim, which is a fantastic small pocket-sized dua book that is available online, as well as the hard copy Hisnul Muslim. You will find this dua, inshallah.
Any other dua, or is that the only
I think this is more relevant to the question specifically.
Okay.
You can make any dua, to be honest. You can say, "Oh Allah, cure me from this distress, from this illness," but there is a specific dua for a specific cure, specific illness. So make that specific dua.
Jazakallah khair. And with that, also do seek professional advice. So please do speak to your consultant and inshallah take the necessary steps. We always encourage you to, all our viewers, to seek legal and to seek medical advice professionally. Again, it's time for a short break. We'll be right back in a few moments. Thank you very much for staying with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, Ask Iman, the late night show where no topic is off the limit. This is the very show where you can ask any question without any fear, without any hesitation, anything that you have in your mind and you feel uncomfortable about it. This is the very show where you can ask us either according to the studio directly, or you can leave us a text message, email us, or leave us a message on our social media platform. You can also watch this program on the Facebook page, inshallah. And we have been discussing in the first segment about the mental health issue, and we have taken a lot of questions regarding this particular subject in our second segment, and inshallah we'll continue now. Two more questions, and we have with us Fadilat Sheikh Khidr Hussain, who is answering your question tonight. Sheikh, let's move on now to the next question, and that is Assalamu alaikum. I trim about half an inch from the tip of my hair 3 times a year. Do I have to fast 3 times for every time I trim? Is it permissible for me as a Muslim female to trim hair?
For females to cut their hair or trim their hair, there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. Some of the scholars, they consider it to be merely makruh, disliked. Some of them, they said it's forbidden, that it shouldn't be done because this practice was not done amongst the female Sahaba, and that which was not recommended, that which was disallowed amongst the female companions. The majority of the scholars consider it to be makruh, disliked. So if a female shortened her hair, and this means that shortened a certain amount, then it is just merely makruh. Some of them, they said, well, it shouldn't resemble a man. This is what is meant by forbidden, that it shouldn't look short like a man's hair. And some of them, they said, well, no, you should let the hair grow and you should keep it the shoulder length. So there is a big discussion amongst the scholars. Some of the Ahnaf, they said that it should be up to the shoulder. Some of them, they said it should be beyond the shoulder. So there is this discussion and debate amongst the scholars. The final answer, we would say, or the final opinion is that it is better not to cut it, but if you trimmed it shorter to a length that it doesn't resemble the man, then it's fine. There is no issue with that. And of course, you don't need to fast if you have cut your hair. Not in any way should you fast because this is not from the Sunnah, nor from the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ towards his wives or the female companions of his times. Wallahu alam.
Thank you for clarifying. And the element of fasting, is it an indication towards kafara? Is the sister, that's what she's indicating?
So I'm not sure where she found that from.
Okay.
If you're thinking that it's a means of expiation because of the wrong that you have done, cutting the hair for the woman, shortening a certain amount, small amount, there is no problem with that, as we mentioned. It's only some of the scholars said as long as it doesn't resemble a man and you don't make it too short, then it's absolutely fine. So there is no penalty, expiation, so you don't need to worry. Wallahu alam.
Thank you very much. Now, moving on, I want to ask a question. I know oral sex is not haram, but is it permissible from the back passage? Now, certain question, I think it needs a little bit of clarification. First of all, if you can clarify, because the viewer is already giving an indication that it is not haram, we need to establish that. And from both sides, men and female. And if you can then complete the other answer as well.
Oral sex, it needs to be avoided. I'm not sure where the sister got the verdict or the fatwa or the opinion from that it is permissible. Absolutely not. It is something that is disallowed and it should be abandoned. It goes against the maruwa. It goes against khilaf awla, the way of doing things. This is not how it's done. So this you'll have to go and study it properly. I'm not sure where you've heard it that it is lawful, but rather it is something that especially Muslims that you abstain from, especially as the Messenger ﷺ has taught us the etiquettes of physical relationship, mujama'a. He has taught us, and from the teachings we find that that is impermissible. It should be abandoned. When it comes to anal sex, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, the hadith is in Sunan of Imam Abu Dawud, where he says, ملعون من آتى امرأته في دبرها أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Cursed is the one who approaches his wife through the back passage, meaning anal sex. ملعون, Rasul sallallahu makes it very clear, he is cursed. Many narrations that we find that it's an act from an Islamic perspective that is forbidden and it should be abandoned from a religious perspective. When it comes to health reasons, we find that if you go and speak to your GP or a medical profession, you will come to know how many illnesses are occurring because of this improper physical relationship that is taking place between a husband and a wife. So for that very reason, from a religious perspective as well as a medical perspective, it has to be abandoned for the safety of your religious commitment to Allah as well as your health. Wallahu a'lam.
Thank you very much for that. And just to clarify, the oral sex, it applies to both men and female.
Absolutely.
And the other clarification I wanted from you is because perhaps we live in a Western society, which is very, very norm in this Western culture and society. So because it has become a norm within the wider society, does it mean that in Islam there is room for changes about these kind of subjects and these kind of matters?
Subhanallah bihamdi. I think first and foremost, we have to understand that our religion has given us guidelines in every aspect of our life, from going to the toilet and relieving ourselves to running a country, from politics to every aspect of our life, hatta all the way till physical relationship. If we study the life of the Messenger ﷺ and how he spent his time with his wives, how the Sahaba spent their time with their wives, we come to know that this was an act that was never done. If a person does it, if a person indulges in that, then they have done something wrong. They should repent and come away from it. The reason is we have to understand that Islam lays ways and adab and etiquettes of doing things, even when it comes to physical relationship. What is the adab of having physical relationship with your wife? That it is done the correct way, through the front passage, not in any other way. The way that has been done by the Sahaba and the way the Messenger ﷺ has left us the message or the teachings. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. And as the Sheikh has mentioned, if you do need any further details, do engage with a qualified scholar, find out a little bit more details about it. And whenever you get an information, always make sure you check it up before establishing an opinion about a particular subject. May Allah protect us from all sort of evils. Now, moving on to a caller now. Let's see who's on the line. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah wa barakatuh. It was just regarding about the mental health issue. See, I just want to say, as Muslims, we have the Quran. Allah gives us reasons how to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves in the right path. So I don't know why when people say they've got mental problems, if you follow in Islam properly and you're doing what's right, then you'll be blessed. Nothing mental can come in your way. And also, just to add before I go, even when back in the time when you're talking about Sahabas, are we trying to say now everyone had mental problems back in the day? It doesn't make sense to me. It's only occurred in this century, the 21st century, mental health. That's what I wanted to raise.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand you're calling from Scotland, is that correct?
So, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you ever so much for passing this information and sharing your thoughts. Inshallah, Sheikh will answer your question in a moment. Sheikh, very valid point, but also we have to look from both this side as well, because we have viewers from all diversity, all dimension. Now, if you can kindly touch on what the sister said and covering all the other aspects as well.
I think the more those of us who are involved in mosques and we converse with people who either go for ruqya or consider themselves to have this illness that we now, as the sister mentioned, in modern day we class it as mental health, the more we speak to the people who specialized in this field, the more knowledgeable we become in this field. And in all honesty, I appreciate the sister's opinion and her words, because not long ago we didn't even know about this concept. We just merely diagnosed it with ruqya. We saw it as possession, or we just saw it as some sort of illness. But now, through study and through progression when it comes to research, so on and so forth, medical study, now that they have discovered that yes, it is a mental related problem. And if you study mental illness, then you'll come to know that why does mental illness take place? It could be the change because of something that has happened in their life, a trauma that has happened in their life. And now the effects of that is so severe. Now it's having an effect on the way they speak, the way they behave, the way they see things, the way they perceive things, the way they conduct themselves with other people. So what is igniting all of those behavioral change? It is because of that trauma that they had. So now it is a mental related issue. Yes, the Sharia has a cure for it, and this is ruqya, as we mentioned. At the same time, it's important that since we are living in a period where we have research, we have medicine, and we have all of those facilities given to us, we can also benefit from that. Not in any way did we say that the Sahaba had mental issues. Absolutely not. All we are saying is that they might have had this illness, that they were experiencing this trauma, this difficulty. Yes, they were around the Messenger ﷺ who gave them remedies, and they were around the best of creation, and he gave the perhaps the remedy to them. So when it comes to treating this illness, ruqya, as we mentioned, is the first option, and we should resort to that, and we shouldn't just class it as jinn possession and something that is we should take it lightly, but rather it is a major issue. And now we can see people through medical research and study, many people are committing suicide, more than 6,500 in 2018. What was the reason? There has to be a reason. The build up to all of those problems in their life, the trauma that they experience. So it's a serious issue.
Thank you very much for clarifying. And also, the experts say, it can start from day to day stress, work related, family related, if they have any challenges in their life. And that's how it initiates. And in no way, Sheikh has mentioned in the first segment, a person can be a very firm believer, but that doesn't guarantee him not having any sort of illness, whether it be mental health or cancer or any other issues. Inshallah, may Allah give us the ability to understand and comprehend in the correct context. It's time again for a short break. We'll be right back in a few moments. Do stay tuned with us. Thank you ever so much. Welcome back to the last segment of Ask Iman, the late night show. We've been taking your question and answering in this very program. And this show is particularly for those kind of questions that you normally would hesitate to ask directly to any individual. And this is the reason why this kind of program or this particular program caters for those specifically challenging, intimate questions that perhaps you find it difficult to get it answered elsewhere. And inshallah, tonight's guest, Fadilat al-Sheikh Khidr Hussain, who has joined and answering your question in the third segment. We've taken a sister's call who has called in all the way from Scotland. And thank you very much for calling in, asking or sharing your thoughts about mental health as we have started this program, the first episode about the World Mental Health Day, which is celebrated every year by the World Health Organization on 10th of October, Thursday, every year. Now, moving on, Sheikh, we've got many more questions to answer. Let's start. The next question is, what is the ruling on sajda sahu in Hanafi madhab? For example, you forgot how many rak'ats, durood, or missed any part of the salah. And what if you doubt that you missed something and, please, there is an important point here, and happens often. What are the fard parts of salah that if you miss sajda sahu cannot suffice?
Sajdatul Sahu, the prostration of forgetfulness, in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa and the scholars and the students that follow that madhab, they are of the opinion that when a person violates an action that is wajib, then they will have to perform sajdatul sahu. An example of that, there are many examples. I want to give one example. In the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, reading Surah Fatiha is not a rukun, is not fard, it is wajib. So if a person, they did takbiratul ihram, takbiratul iftitah, the very first takbir in entering the prayer, and they went straight to a surah. They said alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil, but they forgot to say alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, and they went to ruku. In the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, they don't have to repeat the prayer. The reason is that they have only violated a wajib. So at the end they would do sajdatul sahwu. Whereas the majority of the scholars, they say la salata illa bi fatihatil kitab, there is no prayer without Surah Fatiha. They consider it to be a rukun. So there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. In the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, all of those actions in salah that is considered wajib, they are, if they are violated, then sajdatul sahwu is done because of the deficiency in salah. If there is ziyada, we have to understand one thing here. If there is nuqs, there is deficiency, then of course sajdatul sahwu is done. And if there is ziyada as well, something additional added to the prayer, then of course you will do sajdatul sahwu. An example of that is a person is reading 4 units of prayer, mathalan dhuhr. On the second unit, they sit down and they read tashahhud. After tashahhud, a person reads Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Imam al-Shafi considers it to be recommended, whereas the rest of the ulama, they consider it to be, no, a practice that you shouldn't do. Imam Abu Hanifa says that if a person adds anything after tashahhud, because of the ziyada, that they've added something extra to the prayer, they will have to do sajdatul sahwu. So it is, in this short period of time, we won't be able to tell you all of the wajib acts in salah. According to the Hanafi madhab, perhaps you'll have to read a book that has been written by a Hanafi scholar in this particular matter, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And for someone, and I think at the end of the question you mentioned someone, what was
It said if the brother doubts and it happens often that he thinks that he has missed something, perhaps missed rak'ah, perhaps, for example, he thinks he might have read 3 rak'ahs, but actually he might have read 4 rak'ah, or the forgetfulness,
Okay.
those along those lines that he always constantly forgets, happens often.
So if that forgetfulness happens and it occurs regularly in Salah, first and foremost we have to understand it is shaitan giving us trouble in Salah. There is a particular shaitan that troubles the musalli, the one who is praying. So the ulama, they say, if you feel that, have I done extra or have I done less? So now I'm praying a prayer that consists of 4 units. I've stood for prayer and I'm on my 3rd unit. Now, while I stood up on the 3rd unit, I'm thinking to myself, is this the 4th unit or am I on the 2nd unit? Is this the 3rd unit? The correct and the stronger opinion, qawlur rajih, the more stronger opinion is that you follow the less number. And this means instead of thinking of it to be 4 units, if you've done 3, it's better to think of it as less numbers. and that is the more correct opinion in terms of this mas'ala. So not to think that you've done more, but rather even if you've done more, and it might be the case, but because you're in a state of shak, doubt, it is better to take the option where you think it's less, you've done less. So at least now that you do extra sujood, it's better for you. Wallahu a'lam.
Just give it a practical example. For example, the brother or the sister, perhaps, anyone could be, in his third rakah or her third rakah, and then realize that had he or she has completed fourth or third rakah. So then you're telling that he or she should consider that it should be the lesser one, which is the third rakah, and make it for the fourth rakah, even though he or she may have performed the
Absolutely.
fourth rakah.
And the way out of it is at the end, you do sajdatul sahwa.
Okay.
Because you're in a state of doubt, you're not sure. So the way to do it is that you do a sajdatul sahwa as a means of expiation, and because of the mistake you've made, and the penalty is that you do sajdatul sahwa.
Fair enough, and that compensates for
Absolutely.
that. Okay, now is there any other opinion? Some scholar will say that if you're in doubt, ignore the doubt, go by your heart, and whatever you think you have done, just complete it. If you, for example, if you think you've done 3 rakat, then believe it's 3 rakat and complete the fourth rakat.
When it comes to salah, the scholars, they all align to the opinion that it is better to do sajdatul sahwa at the end and take the less number and do sajdatul sahwa at the end. And that is the more correct opinion. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Next question. If I happen to do a good deed without knowing, do I get rewarded for it?
For every good deed, every action that we do, the presence of intention is mandatory for us to be rewarded for that action. That I have to intend that I am doing the good. For example, I leave my house in the morning and I put my shoes on, and I do this adatan, as a habit, and I didn't put it on with the intention that my beloved Rasul Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, إِذَا انْتَعَلَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَبْدَأْ بِالْيَمِينِ وَإِذَا نَزَعَ فَلْيَبْدَأْ بِالشِّمَالِ. When one of you wears his shoes or her shoes, make sure you begin with the right foot. At that moment, if you thought of that hadith and you consider it to be a sunnah to do this method, now it's become a form of worship. It's not a habit. So the importance of having the intention is absolutely essential. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in his book Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya, in the commentary, Sharh Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya, he says, تمييز العادة عن العبادة, to differentiate a habit from a deed, an action that is rewarding. So often I might do I might be kind to someone, but if I don't have the intention to please Allah through this kindness, many of the ulama, they say it's just a habit. It's just something that you've done without the intention. And having the intention is more rewarding, and you will be rewarded. However, to say that, for example, you have a quality, a good quality, your character is that you're constantly kind and helping everyone. At every action, you might not think, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. You might forget. But if it's something you do on a regular basis, then of course you will be rewarded for it. For every action that a person does, they are rewarded for it. Even a small action that you are doing, inshallah, you as a Muslim, if you do it for the sake of Allah, you will be rewarded. Wallahu a'lam.
Thank you ever so much for clarifying it, Sheikh. Now, before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to come to the basic or initial discussion that we had about the mental health, because we're coming to the end or towards the end of the show. And that is, what practical solutions, some obviously this time or the show won't be enough to cover all the solutions. What practical advice or tips would you give as a qualified Imam and Khatib to our audience or to our viewers who are watching now? What measures they can take, the religious institution, the families, parents, brothers, sisters? What practical tips would you give to them?
The very first thing we say for anyone who is going through this difficulty, speak out. Do not shy away from speaking about this issue. The more you speak out about it, the more you will find comfort, the more help you will find, the more guidance you will find, whether it's from a religious scholar, whether it's from an imam, or whether it's from a health profession. If you speak out against it, if you take certain measures, if you take those steps, then you are treading on a path, inshallah, where you will get cure. But if you remain silent about this very illness, then very soon you might find yourself in a difficult situation, that you have been overwhelmed by this difficulty. And eventually, what did we see? more than thousands of people taking their own lives because there wasn't enough help. They weren't getting guidance. It wasn't dealt with, or they themselves haven't understood the problem itself. So speak out against it. We would say, in addition to that, go and see an imam, go and see a religious figure, get Islamic guidance, Islamic treatment, Islamic remedy, and
From
thereafter
qualified people?
qualified people,
Okay.
of course, and thereafter go and seek professional help. NHS is a fantastic service out there, and they have designated professional people who specialize in this field, helping thousands and thousands of people suffering from this illness in UK. So go and speak to one of those people, and inshallah, Allah will make it easy for you.
Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Thank you ever so much, Sheikh, for all your
Barakallahu fikum.
discussion today.
Barakallahu fikum.
And inshallah, we hope to see you again in our next episode.
Jazakumullahu
Future.
khairan. Barakallahu fikum.
With Jazakallah khair. With this, my dear viewers, we have come to the conclusion of our tonight's program. And I'd just like to summarize what Sheikh has mentioned. And we have to treat mental health real, like cancer, like any other illnesses, because there has been issues in our community and we've been far long quiet about this issue, and it starts from very little, and towards the end we then find out people are going towards the direction of suicide or self-harming them, or even domestic violences we see and hear, and a lot of things we read on newspapers. So that's why it is very, very vital that we discuss these issues and make our community aware of it. With this, we end the program for tonight. Until next time, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.